So for our group video project, we will be exploring inequality across industries and societies. As a disclaimer, this video is an assignment for sociology class Body and Society at San Diego State University. The purpose of the assignment is to help inform us on key issues related to sociology of the body. The positions being advocated may not necessarily reflect the opinions of the students developing this video. This is all the group members and the subtopics they will be focusing on.
Hi guys, my name is Jasleen Singh, and for this portion of the video, I'm going to be going over disparities and inequalities in the healthcare field. This presentation will have 3 parts. First, I'll discuss what these differences in treatment look like and how they can manifest in this specific setting. The second part is going to dig a bit deeper, examine the kinds of biases and preconceptions that this treatment stems from. And then thirdly, I'm going to go over the ramifications that this lack of equality and equity has on both the individual and the population as a whole. So discrimination comes in a lot of different forms, and it can very well look like somebody just calling someone a cruel name or acting in a way that's abrasive, but it's not always as simple as that. It can also look like a healthcare provider failing to provide adequate care due to a pre-existing bias that they have of a certain group. In a quote from a journal article by Paula T. Ross brings up the pattern of minority groups often feeling unheard and neglected. This lack of care and attention is perhaps the most common type of discrimination that these groups experience, and also lowers the level of faith they have in the healthcare system as a result. But why does this treatment exist? Why is it that healthcare professionals pay more attention to some groups over others, especially when they took an oath to do no harm? Daphne Chandler brings up a pertinent point in this quote about how the legacy of slavery still persists even in today's society. And in a research study by Ipsos, which you can see below, they examined the data behind racism in healthcare, and it shows that at least 60% of Black Americans voted for clinicians to be trained to recognize and address bias. However, these biases are so ingrained into our society, and these narratives are so constantly pushed that it doesn't leave room for much else. The clinical gaze is also a shining example of how socioeconomic factors contribute to this issue. Alexandra Housen describes it as a process through which governments create quote-unquote good citizens, and as mentioned here, anything that doesn't fall into that mold gets, for all intents and purposes, discarded. Okay, now that we've discussed what discrimination can look like and where it stems from, we can talk about the consequences. As mentioned earlier, people from these groups that tend to be on the receiving end of this treatment are less likely to have much faith in the system as a whole, much less the healthcare system. And in a study done by the NIHCM Foundation on hesitance or lack thereof to get the COVID-19 vaccination, research showed that Asians at 91% were the most open, and Black Americans the most hesitant. And this fear obviously comes from centuries of dehumanization and dismissal, and in many cases has led to even higher mortality rates.
Hi, my name is Sophia Hildebrandt, and I will be exploring inequalities in the healthcare system towards intersex individuals. For introduction, intersex people are born with certain sex characteristics that don't fit our typical definition of male or female, often facing a lot of backlash and discrimination in the healthcare industry. According to the Dorfik model of sex, there are only 2 distinct genders, male and female. It is based on your physical and biological traits that assume that gender is binary, and it doesn't take into consideration variations in individuals' bodies, including intersex people. Based on the dimorphic model of sex, someone who is intersex wouldn't fit into either category, but will push to fit them into one based on their physical appearance. It pushes this idea on intersex individuals that they have to fit into a distinct category of gender. A major issue intersex individuals face is the use of non-consensual surgeries. Gender affirmation surgery helps an individual transition physically to match their gender identity. As someone who was assigned female at birth but identifies as a male may choose this surgery to help create male anatomy. These surgeries are done usually at an early age and are meant to align with the child's physical appearance. Doctors will often perform these surgeries on intersex children to make their bodies look male or female. These surgeries are usually done before the individual is old enough to understand or give consent to the surgery. It points out how it can cause a lot of unnecessary physical and emotional pain to the individual, especially if that individual grows up identifying with a different gender than what they were assigned at the surgery. Within the healthcare industry, there is a lack of education towards intersex individuals' bodies, leading to ongoing mistreatment. A lot of healthcare providers lack the knowledge and are uncomfortable due to the lack of awareness and education surrounding intersex people. This can lead to improper diagnosis, mistreatment, and mental harm. The healthcare industry needs to adapt to a more inclusive atmosphere and better educate healthcare providers on intersex individuals. The psychological toll of discrimination in healthcare for intersex individuals is detrimental. Many individuals experience anxiety, depression, and PTSD that stems from unnecessary medical procedures or negative experiences within the healthcare industry. Due to the stigma that surrounds their bodies, identity, and gender, it may lead to individuals to be scared to seek out medical help. With the lack of mental health resources available that understand intersex identity and trauma, it can make individuals feel isolated. Doing gender refers to a performative behavior that aligns with society's expectations of masculine and feminine. For intersex people, this performance becomes more complicated, as they don't fit nearly into male or female categories. This reinforces rigid gender norms and overlooks the natural diversity of human bodies.
Hi, my name is Nina, and today I will be discussing the limiting history of cosmetology education. Discrimination in the beauty industry is vast, from limited diverse modeling to limiting beauty to only women and not men. But today I'm going to specifically discuss the impacts of the education gap for textured hair in the cosmetology industry. One of the most critical issues facing the beauty industry is the exclusion of black hair and skincare from cosmetology education. Most cosmetology schools focus almost exclusively on Eurocentric standards, teaching techniques that cater to straight hair and light skin. As a result, stylists graduate with a professional license, but without the tools to serve black clients, perpetuating a gap between licensing and complete knowledge. Even when black hair is practiced on, oftentimes it is altered to be straight, then preserved in its natural state. To address this gap, black cosmetologists are often forced to seek out additional training on their own time and expense. This specialized education, like braiding, wig making, or skincare, is rarely offered in formal programs. The financial burden disproportionately affects black stylists, many of whom already face structural barriers in accessing education and industry support. An article by McKinsey & Company, which we'll later see a video of, emphasizes the lack of support for black beauty professionals. The report states, perhaps most critically, there's a dearth of funding for black beauty entrepreneurs at all stages of development. Despite their presence, black-founded brands account for only 2.5% of industry revenue.
And because that hasn't been done, there isn't data to support how much retailers should purchase, what that looks like. So I think there needs to be a lot more listening that needs to happen. And also in terms of black-founded brands, there isn't enough data to support proper growth of those brands.
This unequal training leads to a sort of segregation of salons. Because many non-black stylists lack the training or confidence to serve black clients, black consumers often feel excluded from mainstream salon spaces. As a result, black stylists are frequently underrepresented in luxury salons and beauty campaigns and instead open their own businesses to provide care. While these spaces offer community and empowerment, the separation reflects a larger industry failure to fully integrate and serve all clients equally. To highlight how this plays out in real life, I googled salon versus black salon. This difference emphasizes the norm in society caters to straight hair, Eurocentric standards, while natural black hair is the deviant we have to go an extra mile to find. This shows how limited the options are for black consumers within the broader beauty landscape. This separation limits not only client access, but also the career advancement of black beauty professionals. In many salons, Black women cosmetologists are expected to step in when a Black client arrives, regardless of whose appointment it is. This practice stems from the assumption that only Black stylists can work with Black clients, reflecting both inadequate education and racial stereotyping. While their expertise should be valued, it should not be exploited. This expectation creates an unfair division of labor and limits Black professionals to only serving Black clients, reducing their access to diverse clientele and broader career opportunities. This expectation reinforces the idea that Black beauty services are supplemental, not standard. It reveals how even within licensed professions, racial inequity is maintained through everyday practices. If we want a truly inclusive beauty industry, Black beauty cannot be treated as an afterthought. It must be a required part of cosmetology education, an expected skill in all salons, and a celebrated element of beauty campaigns. Inclusion starts with education, but it must extend to policy, culture, and professional opportunity.
Hello, my name is Nuhamana Klilu, and today I'm going to be talking about gender inequality in corporate America.
In recent decades, women have made significant strides in the American workforce. But despite progress, gender inequality continues to shape the corporate landscape. From unequal pay to underrepresentation in leadership roles, women, especially women of color, still face numerous systematic barriers that limit their opportunities for advancement. This imbalance stifles individual careers and limits innovation, growth, and fairness in the business world. Today, I will be covering 3 key areas where gender inequality is most visible in corporate America: the wage gap, underrepresentation in leadership, and workplace culture and bias. One of the most persistent and visible signs of gender inequality in corporate America is the wage gap. According to the Institute for Women's Policy Research, women who work full-time make just about 84 cents for every dollar earned by men, which is equivalent to a 16% gap. This gap widens further for women of color. The Economic Policy Institute highlights how Black women are paid roughly $18,900 and Hispanic women are paid $21,500 of white men's wages, despite controlling for factors such as education, experience, and hours worked. A significant unexplained portion of the wage gap remains largely attributed to discrimination, negotiation disparities, and workplace bias. Additionally, when focusing on the underrepresentation in leadership of corporate America, women make up nearly half the U.S. workforce. They hold only about 9% of Fortune 500 CEO positions and only 22.5% of their board seats. This severe underrepresentation is not due to a lack of ambition or qualifications. Instead, it reflects systematic barriers, often referred to as the glass cliff, a term that describes a phenomenon where women are more likely to be appointed to high-level, risky leadership positions during times of crisis or downturn. Lastly, another major contributor to gender inequality in the corporate world is the culture that surrounds hiring, promotions, and daily operations. Gender bias, both implicit and explicit, shapes how employees are evaluated and treated. Research shows that men are more likely to be described as leaders, while women are more likely to be described as supportive. These languages affect promotion decisions, results, and discussion. Confirming previous findings, we found that the difference in usage of agenic terms is statistically significant across genders. Men are more often described as leaders, mentors, and achievers, and attributed sense of humor than women. When connecting this to the sociological aspect of our bodies, according to Hauson, embodiment highlights the relation between the physical body and the social and moral world. Embodiment shows how building expectations due to gender and gender norms can lead to gender assumptions about professionalism, leadership, and competence. Additionally, Hauson defines gender as the established physiological, social, and representational differences between men and women, which are socially determined. Considering this definition, along with the concept of the dimorphic model of sex, due to men being seen as more rational and intelligent in contrast to women being seen as emotional or nurturing, it can lead to a bias in hiring and limit the idea that women can be authoritative and have power. They are seen as weaker and less intelligent, hindering them from being able to succeed in corporate America. Doing gender then additionally makes women feel more inclined to have to smile more or be less aggressive as a way to balance professionalism and feminism. Yet men get rewarded for showing assertiveness and leadership when a woman would be seen as being too direct or not nurturing enough.
We have covered the gender inequalities in the corporate world in USA, and now we're gonna cover gender inequalities in the corporate world and how they differ in Europe. When we look at the gender inequality in the corporate setting in Europe, we might think that in Europe, as like more like a lot of countries put legislations on certain stuff like the pay gap, we might believe that it might be a little bit better than in the US, but ironically, it's actually worse, and the gender pay gap is even worse in Europe. Now, in this slide, we're gonna examine the gender inequality with the use of the statistics that's given and the graph. So, as you can see, less than 10% of top executives in Europe's largest publicly traded firms are female. This is a concerning number because these people, at the end of the day, get the same education. They graduate from the same universities, they get the same diploma, but men get more opportunities than women, which I believe that is like really unequal to do that. And also, the fields of finance, technology, and manufacturing continue to be dominated by men. I think it's because of the bias that's caused in the communities that believe that men might be better in mathematics and man can be better on manufacturing, which I absolutely disagree. At the end of the day, if you get the same education, it means that you have the same skills, and you deserve a similar or the same opportunity as men, as women. So as you can see, in Estonia, 20 men make 29.9% more than women in wages. So Estonia is kind of like a poor country in Europe. But if we examine, we see Germany. Germany is the top three, like most powerful and like economically advanced countries in Europe, and even in Germany, men make 21.6% in on average in wages than women, even though they get the same education. So this is a concerning number, and as you can see, the promotion system bias along with male-dominated informal networks present ongoing obstacles to women's career progression. The average difference in wages between men and women across EU member states was about 13% in 2024, and it's actually still increasing. And according to the analytics, it's gonna increase up to 15% by 2026, which is a concerning number. Um, and even though there are legislations in the corporate companies that say basically just say that 50% of their board of executives should be women. However, this just it just stays like a legislation, and it's not implemented actually in the companies, which I believe that the government should take control of this and make sure that uh, big companies, 50% of their at least 50% of their executive members should be women. And with that way, I believe that we can fix the gender pay gap across Europe, and so that we can give similar, also the same opportunities to women uh, in terms of working in corporate jobs that are in executive positions. Nordic countries such as Sweden and Europe has higher female employment rates. However, in Eastern Europe, there are still gender norms which say that women should be raising the children while man is working, and the corporate cultures differ. While certain corporations focus on fostering diversity, they just some of the other companies just like follow the fixed hierarchical structures which are resistant transformation. So basically, which means that, let's say, it's the Pepsi company in Europe, and so they got like a legislation of they have to have 50% of their board of members as women. However, they do not conform to that legislation and just be stubborn about the hierarchical structures that are resistant to transformation and do not change their board of executives depending on the legislation. Even though, according to the other slide, you can be a little bit pessimistic of the Europe's corporate world setting in terms of the advantages that women have, but um, we also have solutions and hope to this. Basically, there are a few options, which is mentoring and sponsorship opportunities enable women to advance through their careers. I believe that if the companies put more emphasis on mentoring women in terms of leadership roles and also giving them sponsorship opportunities, they will be able to minimize the disadvantages that they face in the corporate world. Also, in Europe and in other parts of the world, there's a thing called motherhood penalty. When a woman is pregnant or has a child, they leave work, therefore their wages decrease. I believe that this can be solved with offering women with home office structure, which they can be still working, but they will be working from home through Zoom or other sources that enable online working. Because at the end of the day, every woman has a right to have a children and raise it, and they shouldn't be affected by their ambition of having a child with a reduced wage gap. Also, equal pay laws combined with open salary practices work to shrink the wage gap between different groups. I think in Europe they should be implemented more, and the government should take it more seriously, because at the end of the day, I believe that there is nothing a man can do that a woman can't. At the end of the day, we are all human. We have the same brain, and if they get the same education and they get the same diploma, they should be getting the same opportunities in life and in the corporate world. Also, education along with media representation and leadership training that confronts cultural norms generates enduring societal transformations. Which that means is basically I believe that charities and governments should be mentoring and training the companies about why they should be hiring more women.
These are our references we used throughout our video.